Sorry to be a little late.
Yeah, that's okay. Hi, good evening. This is the August 24th, 2023 meeting of the Needham Conservation Commission. I'm Dave Harrer, Commission Chair. Before we get started, I'm going to confirm that all members and staff are present and can hear me. When I call your name, please respond. Sue is not here. Reed?
Sue's here now.
Yep.
Hi.
All right, Sue. Hi. Reed?
Yep. Here.
Fred?
Here.
Peter?
Here.
Allison and Paulina are not attending, and Deb
Here.
and Clay.
Here.
Okay, this open meeting of the Town of Needham Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with the Governor Healy's March 2023 extension of the open meeting law temporary provisions. All supporting materials have been provided to members of the commission and are available on the Conservation Commission website. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Here are some ground rules. Before we go to the first item on the agenda, let's cover these ground rules so that we can ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each hearing on the agenda and introduce the applicant and their consultant to begin their project presentation. After conclusion of the applicant's presentation, I will call on each commission member to provide their comments or questions. Please hold until your name is called. After comments or questions from the commission members, I will solicit questions or comments from the staff and then from the public. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair leads the floor to you, and please state your name before speaking. And finally, every vote taken at this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the minutes, I guess the minutes from last week's meeting. Is there any discussion or comments on the minutes? By any of the members? No? Then
Sue, you reviewed them, right?
Yes, I did. There was one little thing that I sent to Clay.
Okay.
That was just a date change from
Yeah.
May 24th to May 25th, I believe.
Yeah, that was it. That's all I could find.
okay, great. Anybody else? Comments? Okay, can I have a motion then to approve the meeting minutes of the Needham Conservation Commission for Thursday, August 10th, 2023?
I move that.
All right, great. A second.
I second.
All right, any further discussion? No discussion, let's vote. Sue?
Aye.
Reed? Reed? Fred?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Chair? Dave? Aye. And I guess, does Reed drop off or?
I'm aye.
Okay, great. Next item on the agenda is any updates on enforcement or violations? Clay, how's our friends on Dedham Ave doing?
I believe there's actually been no changes since the previous meeting. They still have their detention basin and dewatering set up. I've not seen it accumulating any significant amount of water, so I'm guessing they still run it periodically after rainstorms, but I believe that they're still working out with building department how to best move forward with getting the soils off site.
Yeah, I would just note that the soils have been uncovered for more than 30 days, so maybe we could remind them to put a tarp over them or move them.
we can certainly do that. The erosion controls are also still in place. We kind of periodically check in on that as well. I would imagine, aside from the major storm we had last Tuesday or 2 Tuesdays ago, it hasn't really been touched. But outside of that storm, as I said, the erosion controls seem to be looking good. So we can certainly reach out to them and get them to cover and further stabilize the stockpile materials.
All right, so let's move on to the first hearing, which is 49 Green Street, DEP file 234-911. My understanding is this is going to be continued again. Is that
They
correct?
did request a continuance. I did speak to their consultant today. They had some questions regarding the 2-to-1 tree replacement and the 4-to-1 shrub potential. So they are gonna submit something for the next meeting.
All right, great. So can I have a motion to continue this hearing for 49 Green Street, DEP file 234-911?
So moved.
Second?
Second,
All right, any discussion? No discussion, let's vote. Sue,
Aye.
Reed,
Aye.
Fred,
aye.
Peter,
Aye.
and the chair, aye. All right, great. The next item is 381 South Street, DEP file number 234-866. This is a request for certificate of compliance. Is there somebody from the applicant to speak or present?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
My name is Federico Grossi, the current owner of the house, at 381 South Street.
Welcome.
Clay, I don't know if I should present what the original plan was, maybe quickly, or move into what was done. What you recommend?
Yeah, if you want, I can pull up either plan, either the original or the as-built, if you want me to pull those up for you to review.
Oh, I have them up, and I was gonna share myself so I can point to things, or
Sure, you're
you
welcome.
prefer? Okay. Okay, what I'm showing here is the original plan that we had for the house. So the idea was to build a pool and also a pavilion of 24 by 33 here in the backyard of the house. That require that we remove 7 trees that are marked here, and the replacement of the trees that were I don't have a mark here. I can pull up where the trees were to be planted here on this side, and another 8 trees here. So it was a total of 18 trees that we were proposing to plant to replace the trees. After we started the project, we installed the pool and the recharge chambers that were planned, but in the last year, as we were moving out of the house, we actually moved out of the house already in March. We decided not to move forward with the pavilion. So all this part of the project, which require the moving of the retaining wall that you see here in black, and installation of water, gas, and electric to the pavilion, that piece was not done at all. So I will show now the as-built plan. We installed the pool where it was supposed to go. Those 7 pines were removed. We installed the recharge chambers that were supposed to take all the water from what was going to be the pavilion, and we install them not in the exact place that were proposed, but a little to the south, because that was a better spot when the contractor came and started the job. So what we did with those recharge chambers is we hook up the downspouts on the south of the roof for the house, which is about the same surface that was supposed to be drained from the pavilion. The reason that we did that was not to waste those recharge chambers that were already installed. And we had a lot of erosion in this section of the house with all the water running from the roof. So now we avoided that by hooking up the south side of the roof to the recharge chambers. So on the the last 2 or 3 rains, actually there have been no erosion on all these sections. Before we did this installation, you would see all the roots of the trees. It was all no grass, nothing will grow there with so much water running, and now we have grass and it's growing quite nicely. So we have prevented all that erosion. The 18 trees were replaced on actually the spots that were proposed. So here I have them in color. The original proposal for the trees, we have proposed some Atlantic white cedars, 8 units, black cherries, white oaks, and red maples. The red maples I could not source. We planted the trees about a month ago. And I talked to Clay, and he suggested that I ask what could we use to replace the 3 red maples. So in the nursery, they suggested that we replace those with tupelos or black gums and the swamp white oaks. So those 3, the 3 red maples were replaced with 3 that they consider appropriate replacement for the area. So here's what they plant exactly, or very close to what it was proposed. And here they're marked and color labeled on all the locations. All the Atlantic white cedars were actually very close to the creek because they do like water. They like to have their feet wet. And also we put some protection for deer because deer like to eat them when they are small, and that will be removed, of course, after we check them for a year or 2. After they grow enough, we will remove that protection. All the white oaks, the swamp white oaks and the tupelos are in this area as it was originally proposed. So that is what we did, and we are seeking tonight a partial certificate of compliance for the project. The trees, we need to follow them up for survival. I do have one question in that regard. The 7 trees that we removed would have required 14 trees for replacement, and we went a bit over that. We replaced 18. When it comes to survival, are we counting from the 14 that were required or from the 18 that we planted, right? So it's the requirement 75% of the replacement needed or of the trees that we planted. So, I don't know if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions or pull up any plans that you want.
Okay, thank you, Federico. Do any commission members have any questions, comments?
Clay went out and did the site visit, so you should probably have him discuss his findings.
When I was out there, the as-built plan looked pretty accurate. As noted, the pavilion that they were originally proposing to do was not completed. They've just done the pool. I have some photos I can pull up if you want those. I went out and checked the plantings. The plantings have gone in. They were summer plantings, so I think that a couple of the plantings may suffer this first growing season just because I imagine it was probably hard to water them. But also in addition, the Atlantic white cedars closest to the stream bank look like they were actually a casualty of that major storm that we got a week and a half ago that flooded the area. It looks like there was a log that was dislodged during that flooding and seemed to kind of ram over several of those white cedars down there. So they were planted. They looked pretty good, except that probably 4 or 5 of them were currently underneath the log. And it definitely looks
That's
like
bad news for me, Clay. Those were my babies, even that I don't live in the house anymore.
I remember that the Atlantic white cedars were definitely a point of interest. That originally, when this project came before us, Federico was adamant about trying to get those in the wetland area, and he was adamant about sourcing them. And unfortunately, they looked like they were planted with care, but the way that they are currently dislodged underneath the log doesn't look like the log fell, like a tree fell on top of them, but rather that it was pushed over them and took out. There were like fencing supports around them to protect them from deer graze while they establish. So I guess it's up to the commission whether you feel that you can issue the partial certificate without those currently in. The rest of the plantings have been installed. I mean, all the plantings have been installed, which is usually the requirement for the partial certificate of compliance, but it's pretty clear that unfortunately they will not survive, and will need to be replaced at least in some number. As Federico pointed out, he's seeking relief from the survivability 75% of 18 rather than 14 that would otherwise meet the 2-to-1 ratio. But I guess it's up to your discretion as a commission, whether you want to issue the partial kind of contingent on replacement of these trees or not.
So were the Tupelo and the Swamp White Oak already installed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Federico and I had a discussion when he was unable to source the red maples, about precedent for alternative native plantings to be made.
Yeah.
So
That's good.
what he ultimately went with, and I did confirm that they were in those locations and planted out there.
Okay, we got a couple comments from commissioners. Peter?
Yeah, I'm okay with the relief from the strict requirement of the 18. You know, I'd encourage the applicant to replant the white cedars, but in terms of survivability, I'm okay with 75% of what the mandated replacement would have been. My assumption is that since they were just planted, then it's actually a 2-year waiting period. Is that correct?
Yeah, from the full COC, generally the partial has been issued by precedent after the plantings have gone in, but before the monitoring period has been completed. So it would still be an additional 2 years of monitoring before the full COC could get released.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Reed, you have a question? Comment? I mean, excuse me, Fred. I'm sorry, Fred.
Yes, I was wondering, do any of the in the experience of the other commissioners, do any of the other trees besides the white cedars need protection from browsing, either from deer or rabbits, or not? I mean, obviously you can just wait and see what survives, but as a preventive measure, and are these like the 2.5? I know the larger caliper trees are less attractive to
this
browsing,
unfortunately, sorry if I may interrupt.
Sure.
Yeah, I apologize. These were smaller caliper because it's all like I ended up going to the Native Tree Trust to get these, and I bought the largest they had on all the trees, but unfortunately I could not find, I called everywhere, I could not find large caliper trees this time of year, and we're selling the house, so I wanted to get it done But as I read and I asked, these did not need protection. The only ones that the deer really like are the Atlantic white cedar, because when they're small, they eat them all the way up, and then they die. The others, as I did my research about it, and didn't require protection. I may be told wrong by some members of the commission, and if so, we can add something, but apparently they're still good and they've been there for a month. And of course they will get shocked because of the time of year that we planted them, but hopefully they will pull through.
Well, fortunately, we had a wet summer, though, so that was
yeah, that may help.
Yeah,
Last week or
yeah, I just know that especially with smaller trees, the rabbit pressure can be intense. And in the colder months, they'll chew on the bark of the smaller trees, and sometimes they'll girdle the entire tree. And
yeah. Look, I would love some recommendations, because I would rather put some around those trees and protect them than have to replant them next year, because again, we're selling the house, but I've made the compromise with the new owner that I will take care of this. The less I have to invade his property in the next 2 years, the better. So
absolutely. Yeah. Do other commissioners have, I mean, if I'm the only one with that experience, then I'd love to hear it. But yeah, I've found that putting a bit of chicken wire around it will keep the rabbits away.
Based on just inspections of the plantings from today's site visit, I would say that all the species that were planted in the upland, they don't seem to have any browse at this stage on them. I know that they were planted, I think, this summer, so they've only been in the ground for a month or a month and a half, if that sounds right, Federico. But
yep.
I would say probably between 2 and 3 of them look like they might be stressed from the summer planting. I'm not sure. They may rebound. I'm certainly not an expert on it, and they didn't look dead. I wasn't looking at leafless twigs, but there were a couple that looked a little bit stressed just from the summertime planting. I definitely think that the Atlantic white cedars, they were planted well. The protection that was put around those specifically seemed to be doing the trick until a log kind of blew through them. The one that was still kind of untouched, it seemed like it was staked out with a little bit of like meshing around it just to prevent grazing. It seemed to be doing its job, and it seemed light enough that the tree would be able to grow, and presumably that structure could be removed after 2 years after the tree is kind of established itself.
Yeah. Clay, can I ask you a question? Do you check the 4 that were on the side of the house, or the ones on the side of your building, of the creek, from the creek?
So I checked both. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't able to access the white cedars because of all the brambles and bittersweet coming from the house side. So I did find the first, is it 9?
Yeah, the first
handful of them there. I located all of those. And then as I got to that wetland line, it was very, very thorny, and I didn't have an auger with me to try to push back the thorns. So I ended up accessing all of the Atlantic white cedars coming from that Dedamav.
Oh, okay. So you saw the ones on your side of the creek. Yeah, for the other 4, you need to actually go all the way around to the creek, close to the neighbors, and then follow the creek and find them.
Yeah, I was able to see those ones, maybe because the log kind of pushed the way, but the 4 that were on the opposite side of the stream bank channel, I was able to locate those.
And those are the ones that are gone?
Yeah, I can pull up a photo. I'm gonna just stop your share for a moment and pull up a photo here.
Yeah.
So, Federico, are you willing to replant those trees?
Yeah, I'll try. I don't know because I did a special trip to Boston to plant this.
So from here, the stream channel is between me and this side. This is the house side. The house is back behind that wall of vegetation. It seems that this tree came in. You can see here's the tree protection for one white cedar. Here's the tree protection for another one.
Uh-huh.
And then these ones, the log kind of came in and crushed over the top of them.
Oh, I see. So it's just those two then.
It was those two on the other side, closer to Dedham Ave. So that was zoomed in.
And then on the other side of the log.
That one's crushed as well.
Right. That log was already there, has been there for as long as we own the house. And actually it's the log that we used to cross the creek for the plantings. So I guess it's 3 that are gone then, Clay, because there were 3 on a downstream from the log. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, you may have to go and just inventory. I don't.
Yeah.
I did not actually count which ones are collapsing. I didn't try to. I didn't attempt to cross the stream today. If I had had better, I would have walked over and taken a closer look.
That's fine. What I will do, I'm proposing here, just thinking out loud. I can get the landscape guy who actually helped me plant all these a month ago, so he knows very well where they are and what to do and what not to touch and how not to how to walk with soft feet on the wetland and all that. To go and look at them, and maybe now if we can find them, if he's willing to plant them on the other side of the log, since the log has moved, so basically kind of in the same spot. If not, if only those 3 are gone, so I did the math, right? From the 14 that were required, we would need 10 and a half, let's say, 10 or 11 to survive. So even without those 3, we would be, good to start, because we're starting over 14. But I do want my Atlantic white cedars. If he's not willing to do it, very likely I'll end up going back to Boston. So we live in Florida now, going back to Boston a couple times a year. So we're doing the next 2 years, try to replant them if the new owner is okay with it. The question is, as maybe a compromise with the commission, that does not mean that we are resetting the clock on 2 years from the last tree I plant if I don't get them to replant them immediately, since we're still good with numbers even without those trees. So I guess I'm trying to find the middle ground.
Yeah. So any other comments from the commissioners on this?
I was just gonna say, this is Sue. I was just gonna say, so the Atlantic cedars, it sounds like maybe one might survive from the flooding incident, 1 or 2 maybe. And if that's the case, it's fine. I mean, I feel comfortable with an okay, because it would bring that back down to, I don't know, close to the 14 that were required.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that the applicant is proposing to try and replant the 3 or 4 white cedars that have presumably died. But if not, he's still looking for a certificate of partial completion. Do we feel that we should make the certificate contingent upon the planning, or just go by good faith by the applicant? Any thoughts? It seems like even if they're not replanted, he'll still meet the requirement of the 14.
Yeah.
So I'm okay.
It sounds like,
I'm okay with that personally, and if if the applicant is gonna make a good faith effort to replace them, I'm okay with that as well.
I would also just like to add, not to weigh in on whether you should be issuing a partial or not, but just, I guess, a note to Federico. Certainly a good faith effort to plant a couple, or replace the ones that may be failing is probably in your best interest, just because, as I said, there might be a couple of those other saplings, the upland ones that might be heat stressed and may not survive. Again, I don't make this comment to weigh in on whether the partial should be issued or not, but I think 2 years down the line, you may be looking at an issue with survivability if some of these numbers aren't replaced sooner.
Absolutely, I would rather start at 18. I think what I was saying is, if my landscaper is willing to do it, I can get it done in a week or two. If it's not, I may need one of my trips to Boston 6 months down the road. I don't want to reset the clock 2 years then. But he's pretty much checking on the trees like every other week and watering them if it is too dry. So we will see a lot earlier if one is dying than the yearly checkup for you. So you know, we're keeping an eye on them, and hopefully the new owner, I asked them, if they can keep the same landscaper, because I know he's going, to the ones that are upland that you can see. He's kind of visually checking them every week or every other week, and keeping me posted. So as soon as one of those goes down, we very likely will replace it. But regardless, we will have 10, 11 trees in 2 years, no question. The question is,
So you have discussed the 1-year monitoring report with him, Clay?
I know I need to submit a yearly report already. So
Okay.
I'm saying we're checking the trees more often than that.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you knew that you needed a
Okay, so-
a wetland scientist or someone to come up with the report in a year.
Okay, so this partial certificate of completion would be contingent upon successful completion of the 2-year period.
So the full certificate of compliance won't be issued for another 2 years after the monitoring, but the partial pretty much would close out the groundwork that's been done. With the plantings in, it means that the site is now complete and the monitoring is all that remains.
All right, so we ready to vote on this? Okay, can I have a motion to issue a partial certificate of completion for 381 South Street, DEP file number 234-866?
So moved.
Second?
I second.
Okay, any discussion? No discussion, so let's vote. Sue,
Aye.
Reed, Fred,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
and Chair, aye. All right, so good luck.
Wonderful, thank you. Clay, may I ask one more question? When I'm gonna get the certificate of completion, is that in a week or two, or how long does it take?
Yep, it does take us usually at this rate about a week to process the document, get the necessary signatures. I would say in the next week or two, we will either have it ready if you have somebody that you want to come pick it up at our office, otherwise we can send it certified mail. Usually gets recorded at the registry of deeds. So I'll work with you tomorrow on that. I'll give you a call in the morning and we'll talk
Perfect.
next steps.
We'll work on that tomorrow. Okay, thank you very much. Have a great evening. I don't need to stay, right?
No,
No, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone.
take care.
Good evening.
Okay, moving on, the agenda, tree removal guidelines. I don't know, several months ago, we had discussed, making some changes to the tree removal guidelines. Janet, Bernardo, the past chair, and myself made some markups to the current guidelines. We did have, I think in one meeting, we had some partial discussion of some of the guidelines, but we never really got into it. Recently, I updated the draft, and Clay and Deb sent around a markup, a red line, which is in a PDF format, and also a clean copy, which was in a Word format. And so what I would like to do is have everybody have a chance to look at it and provide their comments, preferably in writing or markup, and then we could prepare a new draft, discuss it again, and hopefully adopt it. So open it up for discussion here. I don't know if you all have had a chance to read the latest draft, but anyway, any thoughts, comments?
I can say something.
Yeah, sure.
I don't have my hand raised. First of all, Dave, thank you for all your work. And 2 or 3 things. One, I'm glad the conservation fund was taken out, because there isn't any, as I understand. So I'm glad that paragraph was all taken out. Just 2 little things. One is, I don't know why with RDAs, why it's I know RFD is probably request for determinability, but can we keep it consistent and put RDA instead of RFD that you don't see very much?
Yeah, sure. I mean, whatever the common
That's
terminology is.
just a little question. And then in another area, I think you're giving an example with say if I don't know, was it 3 trees taken down? That you would have, if you broke it up, you're giving the example of trees and including shrubs, but I think where it was, I think you had, I think it was trees. Somehow it came out to be 4 trees were replaced by 2-to-1 trees. Then you had 2 more trees left replaced by shrubs, but I think it just says 4 shrubs instead of 8 shrubs.
All right, we could check the math on that.
And otherwise, thank you, Dave, for all your work.
Well, Janet provided,
I know.
Some comments. So not to preclude any other comments, but one of the things that I think we should discuss is what the threshold tree sizes are too. I don't know.
Definitely.
Any,
Yes, 2.5 for sure.
Yeah, for the replacement trees, but I've looked at some other communities tree guidelines, and most of them talk about 6-inch trees as being the threshold, but some go down as far as 4-inch. So then the other thing that I think was interesting that we tried to do is define a significant tree and make the replacement ratio for that a little stiffer. So again, any thoughts or comments on that, I think would be worthwhile.
And I don't have it in front of me, but do we have a clear distinction of when applicants can use shrubs to replace trees as opposed to trees?
I think
I did have the golf course. I did chat with them today, and so they were thinking kind of for tree replacement that they could just do 4 shrubs for each tree and kind of call it a day.
Well, that's the way that it was originally written. And one of the comments that Janet had was to try to break that up a little bit.
Yeah, I think the commission had generally said, that they want trees as replacements unless for some reason there isn't room for that many trees. And then they would consider the 4 shrubs per tree.
So the question is, how do you make that determination?
Right. I think it just needs to be clear, what circumstances people can use the shrub replacement instead.
Do you have any suggested language? I mean, I could do a little research to see what other communities have done, but offhand, I don't have any particular language.
Yeah, I don't either. I just just because I happened to be talking to them about it today at the golf course. I just figured I'd bring it up.
Okay.
I think two things are important that you've introduced, Dave, is that you know, in the case of a significant tree, and at what size do we start? You know, when they're small. I think those are two significant points. And I think Janet was also asking whether is this going to be a policy or guidelines? That was the other thing.
I mean, I don't know what the difference is. You know, if you dig into it, I don't know what, you know, legal force this has. If somebody wanted to contest it, I'm sure they could. But
I like guidelines. I like guidelines better than policy.
I mean, the reason I put the word policy in there was that our policy is that, you know, in order to remove a tree, you got to get permission and you got to do some replacement. That's the policy. The rest of it is guidelines. And so
Yeah.
I've seen like some of the other, you know, write-ups that I've reviewed. They all sort of have that statement in there, just to make it clear. The other thing that I added in there was, you know, just to create a process that, you know, this is how you do it. And, you know, if it's just one or two trees, and, you know, maybe it can be handled administratively, but if it's more, or if it's associated with other work at the site, then, you know, you got to show the trees on the plot plan and all that.
And another thing that's
I think-
come up recently a few times is you know, the people on Ivy, and again the golf club today were asking if the commission counts the Norway Maples, whether they count them as actual trees, or since they're invasive, if, you know, we're happy they're going to remove them and they don't have to replace them.
Oh,
So
yeah, we talked about that before. I happen to
Yeah.
have 3 Norway maples on my property. One of them I had to have taken down because it was diseased, but these are big trees. They're like over 24.
right. So I just didn't know if we
36,
wanted to have something specific in the guidelines regarding that.
I mean, to me, a tree is a tree. If it happened to be invasive years ago, it's certainly, you know, a functional tree now. I think the whole invasive issue has to do with you know, the smaller trees, or maybe a tree out in the forest somewhere, but, you know, in
Just an
property.
idea if you want to kind of add some language to that to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any,
I assumed in there that tree's a tree.
excuse me?
It's assumed in what's written that a tree is a tree.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I'd be leaning, you know, unless there was something destructive about it, but I'm not aware of anything like that. I got to admit that I hate Norway maples, but that's beside the point. You can't grow a lawn under it because, you know, it's a dense shade, and the roots come to the surface. But anyway, that's any other comments from anybody? If not, I would ask everyone to review the document, provide any further comments, and you know, hopefully we could get this to a point that we could all agree to it and vote to adopt it.
I think all the issues, the concerning issues are included in there. You know, the addition of significant trees, or the, you know, where do you start at 6 feet, or, you know, with the caliper, where do you start? And the fact that we've gone to 2.5 caliper, which is great. I mean, I think all the significant issues are there.
Okay, good. All right, if there's no further comment on this, let's move on to conservation programming. This is something that you could speak to, Deb or Clay.
Yeah, at the last meeting, I just I asked the commission members to think about any programming that they may wish to either be involved in or lead. We're working to come up with our next kind of year's worth of educational and outreach programming. And in the past, we've discussed things like doing walks with the commissioners, either invasive species or bird walks, things of that nature. I don't know that I probably should come up with a date or a specific meeting for us to kind of set a discussion or a deadline to see if commissioners have anything that they'd like to do. So I guess I'm not looking for a concrete answer from anybody tonight, but I put it on the agenda just to kind of circle back and see if we can get people thinking about how they might wish to engage with the public and on some of the non-permitting things that we do. I think previously Janet also had done like a stormwater walk, and we do have that watershed model. With that, I will also add that Harvest Fair is coming up. Conservation is going to have a table at Harvest Fair. That's October 1st. I think it's a Sunday. So if there's any commissioners interested in coming and standing with us at the table, we'll have the watershed model. We'll have some of our other materials and pamphlets out, but it's a good opportunity to engage with the public, and people often have questions about what it is we do, about open space, and also about kind of wetlands at large and some of the issues that you guys deal with here at these meetings. So I also wanted to throw that on everybody's kind of mental schedule, that October 1st is Harvest Fair, and we'll have a table.
I stopped by there last year, and it was the busiest table at the Harvest Fair. It was just crowded with kids. So
that watershed model does a lot of work pulling people in. It's definitely flashy. It's engaging.
I was impressed.
To it.
All right. I know one thing would be of interest to me is just doing a walk and pointing out different species, especially invasive species. I think that would be informative for a lot of people.
So I think what I can do is I'll send out an email reminder ahead of the September 14th meeting. And I'll give you a little bit more concrete guidance to think about any programming that you as commissioners may wish to do. And then we can have a more directed conversation about it at the September 14th meeting.
Okay, great.
Clay, if we have some preliminary ideas about an educational event, should we send them to you so you can start collecting them, or how should I do it?
You certainly can. You're welcome to send an email, any comments ahead of that our next meeting. You can also bring it up at the next meeting. I won't necessarily force you guys to pick a date, but if you know what kind of programming it is, there might be a certain time of year that it's better suited to. And then we can start as the conservation staff, Deb and I can start looking at some of our outside educational programs that we bring in through some of the funding that we have to do so, and we can kind of space out and either have quarterly programming or kind of keep conservation on people's minds throughout the year and there. And with that, we do also have just a lot of engagement at the reservoir. Obviously, Deb and I work at PSAB, so we're at the reservoir pretty much every day, but we do talk to a lot of folks around the reservoir trail. There's a lot of photographers out there, a lot of people coming to see the herons, the great blue herons, as well as a green heron out there. The other day, there was an osprey that drew a lot of people in. In the past, there's been otters and beavers and all kinds of things. So the public is definitely, there's at least some residents that have a pretty acute awareness of conservation and what the department does and what you guys do. So.
Yeah, and we also, as part of the dredging project, we're gonna get a nice kiosk out there by the reservoir, so we can start posting these events and different things, because we get a lot of foot traffic around there, so that will be good.
Okay, great. Let's move along. Code of conduct policy. Last meeting, we discussed that briefly. This is something that the select board is recommending that various commissions around the town adopt. They provided a draft template, and Reed had volunteered to look at the template and perhaps modify it to be applicable to the Conservation Commission. Reed, do you have any progress or still a work in progress?
Yeah, no, sorry. I have just been very busy, and so haven't had a chance to really make much progress, but I'll try to have something for the next meeting.
And I do apologize. I did not mean to put Reed on the spot. I did include the discussion on the agenda so that it was placeholder.
No, I appreciate the check-in.
Yeah, no, that's fine. There's no big hurry. And I think everybody kind of agreed that we should do it. So as long as we're, making some progress, that's fine. Okay, the final item is the remote public meeting discussion. I think the last time everybody had a chance to speak pro or con about the two choices that we had before us, hybrid meeting versus what we're doing now, the fully remote meeting. And then was either Clay or Debbie conducted a poll, online poll.
Yeah, so I had sent an email, and we did hear back from everyone. And I just think based on the discussion at the previous meeting that the majority still feel as though they want to participate remotely at this time.
Okay. So, let's leave it at that, and maybe we could revisit this in so many months. And any other thoughts, comments? All right, so that's it.
Before you adjourn, I do want to bring up one topic that didn't quite make it to the agenda because it's more recent, but we have been in discussions with our build with Hank Half. Deb, what what department?
Oh, he's what's it called?
Planning and
The building, the PBBC.
He's
The PB, like the
public
building something.
oversight commission, or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
so
The permanent public building committee, or
yeah. So as you guys are probably aware, the Ridge Hill structure, the house and the garage are now down. A meadow has been established in the footprint. I can pull up a photo. It is pretty satisfactorily vegetated. As you can see, it's grown in. It blends to the other meadow area. I mean, this is part of the footprint, and here's the previous meadow down in the back there. So it's grown in. It's not clear yet what our recourse is, though. I believe when they came before you for guidance on how best to move forward with this, it was intended to be a pollinator meadow with more wildflowers. And the contractor, I don't know if it was a difference in seed mix or if the flower portions of the seed mix just didn't germinate, and we got stuck just with the sedges as part of that conservation mix. But as you can see, there's not a lot of flowering things. As Deb and I are working with Hank on kind of wrapping this up and having them take any outstanding erosion controls out now that the site is stabilized, I guess I just wanted to bring it to your attention and see if you had thoughts, if you're satisfied with having a vegetated meadow area, or if we should be pressing or kind of revisiting what our options are for establishing more pollinators within these footprints.
won't that happen automatically, naturally, or not?
I think kind of like the meadows that were outside of this footprint, just the meadows that are mowed annually. There's not a lot of creep in of new species. I think the seed bank is pretty well established, and we end up with kind of this herbaceous sedge that's throughout the meadow, and it certainly serves its purpose. The meadow is definitely a pretty valuable habitat for Ridge Hill, in my opinion. I think that the original discussions for this area was to create that seed bank to have more of the pollinator friendly species that can help our stressed pollinators. I think that there is value to this as well. And I guess the question that we're working with Hank is, again, if this is satisfactory as it stands, or if we should be seeing if there's recourse with the contractor or somewhere else to try to establish more flowering species, more pollinator friendly species within these areas.
Can they overseed it?
That's a good question. We could certainly see if there's funding. I mean, part of it that I'm sure will come up in the discussion is what seed mix they use, if the contractor's on the hook because they use the wrong seed mix, or if something is changed, or if it would be an additional expenditure from public funds to try to overseed it, if that's something that we want to try in the future or something that we want to try now. So we can certainly raise that question.
Is this something that would be mowed periodically or not?
Yeah, I believe that the intent was to mow it similar to the meadows as an area that remains primarily herbaceous to prevent the woody growth from encroaching in, unless Deb has any.
No, that should be the plan going forward. I think the commission was looking at this as a great opportunity. So we did ask them to spec the pollinator seed mix that Clay had researched. And you know, we also had the same difficulty with the Walker Pond seed mix. It wasn't the seed mix that we had specified. And while it's very attractive, it doesn't have the pollinator species, a lot of the native species we were looking for. So we're trying to get the town on board to use the pollinator mix on these different projects, and it just seems to be a disconnect between what we spec and what actually is delivered. So these, you know, we don't know what the ultimate use for these areas are going to be, because they, you know, are under the select board. And so that's kind of a moving target as to what this is going to be. So we were, you know, just kind of trying to use this as habitat for now. And then find out what the actual plan is from the town. So it's up to you. What you would like to do.
Yeah, and having not, in addition to having this as a habitat, kind of a pilot, as Deb pointed out, this being building envelopes being the select boards, it also provides an opportunity to look at getting some kind of signage that brings attention to pollinators and the importance of various native species. So while the future of the building envelope portion of Ridge Hill, where these new meadows are established, that was kind of our hope, at least my my hope. As you guys know, I've been a little bit more invested in pollinator species and reestablishing some of the flowering, year-round flower, season-long flowering plants, specifically to try to bring more awareness and provide more habitat to some of the, not just the honeybees, because the honeybees aren't even the native pollinators. I mean, they're important for our agricultural uses, but really there's several species of bumblebee which are really struggling, as well as several butterflies and other solitary bees, things like that all make use of some of these pollinator habitats.
So why can't we tell them we want the pollinators and you know, make it happen?
We certainly can. I guess tonight is to bring it to your attention and see how the commission favors it, because if it's your will to just have it as meadow, that this is satisfactory, then certainly we as staff don't want to be overstepping and going against your will. And I think, as I said, I think that as a meadow, it also serves a certain, you know, value that we have all this edge habitat. Ridge Hill is pretty unique and pretty important because it's not just old growth forest. It's got all these different habitat features that are so important. So I don't want to discount what it now is, because what it is now without the buildings is still a habitat in its own right.
Better than it was, right?
Yeah.
Fred, you
So
had
yeah, or sorry, can I ask a question? So I guess that there's portions of the Ridge Hill like nearby along the driveway, I think, that are just turf grass. I'm curious if we could put wildflowers in that area rather than rip up the sedge grass.
That's a good question. I'm only speculating, but I think that the kind of the lawn grass areas are probably maintained that way to facilitate. But now there's no longer buildings. There's at least one building up there, but I think that there's a certain width that has to be maintained for things like fire access, first responders, and things like that. So I think that kind of falls into almost roadway access.
Got it.
All right, Fred?
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time at Ridge Hill, and I think Peter does too. So I'm going to be interested to hear what he says. But I know that there's a wild aster that grows in those meadows, and it's a very nice aster. Fall. Let's see, is it a fall bloom?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a blue aster, kind of low growing. And there's also milkweed that grows in some of the parts of there. So, I mean, seeding some of that aster in the new planted areas might be nice. It's definitely it's a particular. I don't know if it's stiff aster. Maybe Peter knows what it is. Butterfly milkweed. I've never seen it there, but I wonder if that would thrive in that new area. And then in terms of the other habitat, I think the most of that prairie, that meadow, is Pennsylvania sedge and little blue stem. And the stuff right along the driveway is probably some European turf grass. And I was hoping they didn't put any of that into the new areas. But those two grasses make up the majority of it. And there's a lot of ground dwelling bees. I think the biggest destruction on those bees comes from people driving their cars onto the meadow. People do not limit themselves to parking in the designated areas, and kids do joyriding, through that area at times. And
Yeah, I think that's why we had the boulders put along, because
but
we did have people.
Yep, but the boulders don't cover everything. They don't really totally block access, and I think also the work trucks are not, they're not sort of very mindful of how compressing the soil is going to destroy that habitat. So I have lots of ideas about things that I'd love to see preserved at Ridge Hill, but I've said enough for now.
All right, Peter, you had some comments?
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually have a lot to add. I mean, what Fred said is pretty much what I was asking. Was when you talk about pollinator species, is that what you're talking? Are you talking about the goldenrods and the milkweeds and the asters? The kind of mix you see over at Charles River Peninsula, for example, or something else?
Yeah, I guess it would be more like a mix you see over at the peninsula, or something that's more varied, kind of like a targeted area. So something that if I were to envision it myself, I would not talk about encroaching into the existing meadows, because those are established and serve a purpose of their own. As I said, the meadow is its habitat in its own right. But having these other areas where you can really focus on flowering species that are varied and provide a broad range, you get a couple of different things. You attract different species, so you get kind of a buffet for everything. You attract different vegetation types. Even if they're all herbaceous, you still get things that are a little bit more robust versus things that are a little lighter. And then you also get seasonal flowering. So you get species that are really early flowerers, and species that are later, so that you're really getting the full forage for a varied number of things. So it's less targeted than maybe the meadow is, and the meadow would probably have kind of its own subset of species that favor that. But This would be more of a conservative like lifeline for a broad spectrum of pollinators.
I get it. So you don't want a big block of goldenrod. You'd prefer a whole mix of different seasons and species. And
Exactly. And as I said, it's not really something that I would envision giving up. You know, I think that if when you're presented with new areas like this, or if you have broad areas, there's something to be said about not creating monocultures, but designing areas based on the needs of that specific area. This would be more of an educational tool to talk about all of the different things you could have. So if you have a true restoration project, say in like a riparian area, establishing like a wet meadow that favors a species that you know is there, that's a little bit different than kind of a shotgun blast of all these different species that we can try to get in and at least raise some awareness.
got it. Yeah, I mean, so given the educational component of the potential for this, I would pursue trying to get some redress for this particular area.
Sue, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, are there any rumblings going on about other ideas for those 3 acres under the selectmen where the buildings have just gone down?
I
Like
haven't
other
heard
purposes
anything.
there?
I did send Kate an email some time ago because, you know, we had been talking with Park and Rec about the different trails, including the Fit Trail. And, you know, they were talking about revamping that. And if you remember, Kate had wanted to put a, you know, a roadway essentially through the Fit Trail. So I mentioned to them that I didn't know that
Yeah.
it all stopped when COVID started, that whole pursuit. So I did send Kate an email to try to get an update, and she said that it was one of the select board's top goals going forward to continue with the talks and the studies.
Weston and Sampson. Yeah, is Weston and Sampson still present with them, with all that?
I don't
Was it
know.
Weston and Sampson that was?
I think it
Hmm.
was, and you know, I don't remember if there was more funding approved at town meeting for, you know, more studies on this or not.
You talking about
So-
Yeah.
you talking about the road?
Well, just the Nike site and the select board property, and they were looking for a land swap, and then they wanted to connect both properties through some kind of roadway through Ridge Hill. So, you know, there was a big momentum for all of that for a period of time. And then COVID hit, and you know, haven't heard anything else. The last thing was I was supposed to bring the select board for a walk through the woods to show them where their supposed roadway was going to go. But then that got canceled. So
Is this a paved roadway that they would put through those woods? Huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
For what purpose?
There was a big issue.
I think the reason was there was talk about some other use where the buildings were. And also they were talking about some other use at the Nike site. And
Yeah, for the hockey arena.
yeah, so there's
Yeah.
there's an issue about utilities and all that. So I don't know.
Well, and the other issue is that Pine Street is a one-way.
Yeah.
So
I
they
don't
were
think
trying.
I don't think that stuff's going anywhere, but
Hmm?
I don't think any of that's going anywhere now, but I don't know that for a fact, just, you know, from
Yeah.
talking to people. But
I don't know.
can I make a suggestion here? I know several people have talked about some issues at Ridge Hill in general, and I agree. I think there's some things that need to be upgraded there. The parking areas, you know, I think need some work. I know there's a couple spots on the trails that need some work, and I'm sure we can come up with a lot of different ideas. I'm on the Community Preservation Committee, and you know, there's no reason why we couldn't put together a request, at least a minimal request to get a little study done on upgrade upgrading some of these things. I know the deadline for applications for this current cycle starts, pretty soon. So if there is interest by the commission, then I would say let's try to pull something together. And maybe we could meet with one of our consultants and have them present an estimate of taking a look at some of these things and pulling together a price. And I'm sure we get the money. There's not there hasn't been, I don't think, a request from the conservation area in a while, and there is some money that hasn't even been spent, looking at upgrading the trail signage and all that. And I know Debbie and Clay have been trying for a while to set up a meeting with
We found out that we didn't have an actual contract from Ty and Bond, so that's kind of our hold up right now. We're trying to get the contract. So
okay,
that
but what I'm throwing on the table is maybe we could get them to give us an estimate to do some additional work to fix these things that everybody's talking about. So I just throw that out as an idea, and then if everybody's receptive to that, then let's make a list of things that we want to fix up.
Who should we send thoughts and ideas to, Dave?
I would say, Clay or Debbie could coordinate.
Yeah, send it to both of us.
Yeah, and then we could discuss it at our next meeting. Putting together an application, for a little study or whatever. I don't think it's a big deal. I think we could do that ourselves.
And just off topic, Dave, I had forwarded you an email that Concom needs to recommend a new member for appointment to the Climate Action Plan Committee.
Oh, yeah.
Because Artie Crocker is representing the planning board at this point. So so the town manager's office asked that the commission appoint someone to that.
Yeah,
So
I saw that. I don't know if everybody's familiar with what the Climate Action Committee does. I did look at their website. I would encourage everyone to go to the website, which is part of the town website. Maybe, Debbie, you or Clay could send around a link, but I don't know if anybody's looked at it. Anybody is interested, wants to volunteer.
Does it meet in person?
At night, I don't know. I know
good
it's,
one too.
I'm teasing.
no, but I know that they have quite a broad charge, and they have, I don't know, 5 or 6 different subcommittees as well. So I mean, I think it's all important stuff, but I can't give you any details. But if anybody's interested, that would be a great way to meet different people around town. I know, Janet convinced me to join the CPC, and it's been an interesting opportunity, and I have met a lot of different people, and saw, the way things, are handled in the town, and so I think it'd be a good experience for somebody. And is anybody interested?
I have some interest.
Okay. So does that mean you want to be
Well, I'd love to look at their page on the town website and sort of see what their mandate is and what their mission is, and I'll let you know, but I'll certainly look into it.
yeah, okay, that's great. That's great.
Thank you.
All right,
Yes.
so
I
Any-
do.
I'm sorry.
The Meadow, I just had one more question for Peter. Based on his comments, Peter, you had said, given the educational component, you'd be in favor of pressing for a more a pollinator garden seeding for kind of reclaiming that new meadow area. Is that contingent? Is trying to press for that contingent on also having that educational component? And by that, I mean, I would like to get some kind of signage or educational something up in the kiosks, but if that weren't the case, if we weren't able to get the educational component, would you rather see this meadow remain as kind of what it is versus trying to push back for new seating?
No, I mean, I think that's the strongest argument is the educational component, given that it's not the long-term prospects for this particular thing. I don't know. I mean, it's so uncertain about what's actually going to happen to it.
I think just the fact that we gave them the spec and
It's weird that you didn't get the seed mix that they were supposed to put down.
yeah, so it's kind of on them. We gave them the spec and
Yep.
if they didn't produce it, then they need to fix it, in my opinion.
I agree with that. If we don't ask, then we'll never know.
Exactly, and you don't want it to happen again because it seems to have been a pattern. Do you think? Do you guess it's just because that's the mix that they had at hand, and they didn't even bother looking?
That's kind of the sense that I'm getting, is that they're kind of leaving it up to the contractor and
Or whatever seed mix they happen to have.
yeah, it appears to be the case as far as I know. I don't know if Clay
Right.
knows anything else.
That would also be my speculation. I would hesitate to make an educated guess.
Sure.
At least in my speculation, we did have discussion back and forth during this process where they confirmed the seed mix somewhere along the line, along the chain. So I'm guessing it was somewhere on the back ends when they were getting ready to seed that the seed got swapped out, whether it was due to funding, sourcing it, or just not paying attention and using what was on hand. That would be my speculation.
Okay,
Is there a clause in this business, accept no substitutes that is, I mean, I imagine that the people are in general, most customers are not so well informed about the differences in the seed mixes, and probably they don't get a lot of pushback, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll certainly go back and I've been in discussions with Hank about just going to check to make sure the site is stabilized and they can start removing things like the construction fencing and whatnot. So I will pose these questions and press a little bit to see where the mix-up might have been and if we can rectify it with something a little bit more robust.
Thanks for doing that.
all right, so any other comments? Then let's entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn the meeting.
Okay, great. And second?
A second.
All right, let's vote. Sue,
Aye.
Reed,
Aye.
Fred,
Aye.
Peter,
Hi.
Dave, aye. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Take care.
Thanks, good night.
Good night.
Bye.